My name is Thibaut Worth, and I have two partners who have helped me to organize this, and Angela, who's going to be moderator. And where is Emily? Emily Marsh. So Emily has done a great job with promoting this event, and I've been helping out with promotion as well as reaching out. I assume that most people are familiar with Shareable. This is an offshoot of that publication, and we're super excited by the turnout tonight. It's really, really awesome to see so many faces. And we did this because we're very excited, we're all very excited about collaborative consumption, the sharing economy, and we wanted to start a dialogue between people who are actually working in these companies and enthusiasts, people who are just excited about the idea. And yeah. Thank you. So here we are, and we're having this first event on building trust and limiting risk in the sharing economy. So Angela is going to be up here for about an hour, and I'll be quick about this. I just want to make a couple thank yous. First, obviously, thank you to Couchsurfing for offering up this awesome space. In particular, Kate, Jen, Tammy, and Blair. I've been in email contact with all of you. I assume there's other people that have been helping out that I haven't, so thank you to all of you. Thanks to our food sponsors, Stoll. Stoll provides referral marketing software that allows brands to acquire new high-value customers through word of mouth. And they offer 6 to 10% new customers. And there's Matt Roach here, and Sarah Diego. And last but not least, this may come as a surprise to some of you, but Sidecar is offering free rides to the event. So if you pay to get here, I'm sorry about that, but you can ride away for free because they're offering rides back home as well. So you just have to make sure that when you leave, you're actually here at Couchsurfing as your pickup point. A couple of other things before I hand it over to Angelo. The event is being live streamed around the world to the Shareable community. If anybody wants to tweet or let anybody know that they can watch this, it's www.livestream.com/shareable. And for tweeters, we're using the hashtag #ShareSalon, just to make it a little bit easier. So without further ado, I turn it over to you, Angelo. And I'm going to give my microphone to Phillip. Sorry.
Thanks, Thibaut. So just to start off our conversation, trust and safety, what does it mean? I just want to have a working definition for tonight. And when I say trust, I'm thinking that there's a factor of how do I know you're going to do or say or be what you really are? So are you going to be there and let me into your house? Are you going to not break something? You're not going to mess it up? So that's what I'm talking about, trust. So a low level of inconvenience is, are we going to act, nicely to each other? The second issue is safety. Much rarer occurrence is something going to personally happen to me that I'm going to regret. We have trust and safety in our society. I just want to make sure trust is, a lower level issue. Safety is much more serious. And that's because the NSA and Google have been so busy. I want to talk about privacy. And it's just like, wait, are you reading my emails? Are you, going to just sell advertising to me? Are you giving my information to other people who are then going to target me with whatever advertising? So just kind of having that issue around trust and safety. So just having these working definitions for tonight. And I'm hoping Bogdan's not going to disagree with the sociological perspective on that, but hopefully not. So, given these definitions, I just want to start off and ask you, what is the biggest issue for your users? Is it trust? Is it safety? Is it privacy? And just to start off with Couchsurfing, our host, Jen, who's in charge of trust and safety at Couchsurfing. Can you tell us what are the issues for your users?
Sure. This is my only mic. I'll be loud. You can share. We're going to share a mic. That's right. We don't need 5. We only need 1. So I guess I would say it would depend on the user. So certainly some users are much more concerned about their safety. Some are more concerned about the sort of currency of trust and how they can build trust networks. And then there is a segment of users who are very, very concerned about their privacy on Couchsurfing, as I suppose you have a subset in any community. So I would say the biggest area of question that we get typically is around safety. Is it safe? Those aren't necessarily questions from users, but prospective users or newer users.
Thank you.
Yeah, so with Airbnb, I would say that a lot of our users are mainly concerned with how are you going to bridge the online to the offline. And so within Airbnb itself, we've kind of built out, obviously, the review system, the verified payment, you know, a secure payment structure itself, being able to message with users from an online perspective, and then also bridging it to the offline. So offline, after a reservation is happening with a host guarantee, 24/7 support. I think that's what a lot of our users are trying to figure out and are concerned about. And to that point also, that's where kind of verified ID comes in, is trying to identify who a user is, and how they're potentially going to act on Airbnb too.
And then a slightly different question for Bogdan. Bogdan's a Ph.D. student in sociology at Stanford, and he's also worked at a number of companies in the collaborative consumption space. Is this any different, what we're seeing today, with online communities or online-offline communities than what's historically happened?
Well, I mean, no. Obviously, the concerns are really the same concerns that exist everywhere in the economy. The difference is that a lot of these transactions could not have happened before because these concerns could simply not be assuaged in any ways when I'm talking about strangers. So this would be the short answer as to what is happening in the sharing economy. So obviously, this is kind of a common sense answer. You have transactions. You have people who maybe would have wanted to host people in the past. You have people who maybe would have wanted to give rights to people, to the right kinds of people in the past. But in a society where you don't know the person you're interacting with, previously there have been very few possibilities to gain information about those people. So I think the concerns really come with a kind of economic exchange that is happening here, which is actually, we're talking about exchanges that have existed for a long time. But the difference is that now these new platforms are managing more or less to bridge to address these concerns.
So to switch a little bit now, I think there are different tools that we all use in our everyday lives as well as these communities use to ensure there's trust and safety and safeguard privacy. I've broken them down roughly, again, last working definition. It's basically, in my mind, there's a community which reviews each other and makes complaints to the company known, and that's one source of trust or tool. The second is the company itself. It's verifying things about you, it's doing data mining, it's looking at your activities. And then the third, I think, are these third parties, whether they're government regulations or whether it's insurance, etc. So thinking about these tools or these processes that help you ensure your members are safe, I'll ask Sonny first, since you represent one tool very emphatically, Jumio.
And since the technology is so new, it's kind of a new concept, people to show their IDs. Even though you show your ID all the time when you check into a hotel or things like that, to show your ID to the web camera is kind of a new concept.
Thanks. Jen, what do you think is the most effective tool for you in Couchsurfing? Is it the community in terms of their reviews? Is it what you can do in terms of data mining or verification of people, whether through Jumio or some other service, or probably not, government and insurance?
Well, I think that there are different tools for different purposes. So one of the things, certainly I would say the community is our biggest source of providing trust and safety. And I think that that's kind of true in life in general. Like I think about this a lot when I'm driving. I'm actually quite dependent on the drivers around me. Or when I'm sleeping in my house, I'm quite dependent on my neighbors to not start a fire and burn all of our homes down. So I think there is this notion in some ways that strangers are more dangerous than people we know, and that's actually quite the opposite of the truth in many cases, in many types of crime. So as far as tools go, we work really closely with the community, and one of the things that I've been doing over the last several months is working with a small group of users who are deeply invested in the safety of the community and have watched Couchsurfing grow over a period of time. And one of the key insights that we've gained that I have been the most passionate about is really understanding where we might be seeing things underreported. So certain types of crimes that are typically underreported in society and likely elsewhere as well. So one of the things we found recently is that giving users a prompt for safety feedback rather than waiting for feedback is something that could enable us to actually better assess the safety of the system. And we often learn things about the safety of the system through breakdowns of it. So we're really working on increasing our inflow and actively seeking feedback and anonymous feedback from users. So that's one of the first things we learned. People are sometimes reluctant to give public feedback for fear of reprisal, that kind of thing. So it's a little bit different than a transactional marketplace where we're, you know, in some ways we have the luxury of not having to deal with fraud, that kind of thing right now. So we can focus more on community reporting aspects and things that help increase our understanding of how the community functions and how the community protects itself.
So for Airbnb, I think that this is kind of like a 4-part answer, so hopefully I don't take too much time. The first part of it is, I believe it's setting a baseline. So with the user base, you actually have a good understanding of what is good behavior. At Airbnb, at any given night, we have 50% of our 50% of our guests are returning guests. So with that, you actually have a solid baseline of what is good and reoccurring behavior. And with that, anything that falls kind of outside of those norms, you really need to insert yourself in there and try and educate the users themselves. That's kind of where the second part of this comes, is the people. So the people that we're hiring for the trust and safety team through Airbnb, we're not hiring security guards. We are hiring people. We are hiring people that can actually communicate with other members of the community. We are hiring our community members themselves, and we are training them to kind of build that educational platform itself. The third part of this is kind of, once again, bridging that gap, is making sure that people have a good understanding of, you know, how is somebody going to act on an online behavior, how are they going to potentially act on an offline. So really making sure that in that education piece, people understand secure payment structure, understand the review section as well too. And then the last part of it is kind of just running it for full circle and making sure that across the board, people are truly educated about the process. Example would be like a host, making sure that their listing is fully filled out, so there's not missed expectations. A story that I have in my past is, so I have a 9-month-old son, and I travel, obviously, on Airbnb all the time. And in a recent situation, we went down to Venice Beach. And all of a sudden, this host, who was this amazing host, had great reviews, started asking me about my son. And I felt really, really, almost the edge of violation, where it was kind of like, whoa, you're asking me a lot of these interesting questions, like how old, how big is your son? And so I kind of put my trust and safety hat on for a moment. I said, hey, you know, I'm wondering why you're asking me these questions. I'm starting to feel uncomfortable. And she actually related to me that she had a year-old son. And she was actually trying to be a really amazing host. She was trying to make sure that I didn't have to bring my stable of goods with me through TSA and in the airport and make sure that the stroller got there. She actually provided all those things to me. So it comes back to just making sure that education is known throughout the community and making sure that those missed expectations are as limited as possible.
Okay. Just to play devil's advocate, no one's mentioned government at all. Is there any role that the government can play to help set up a system that's not a hindrance? I mean, obviously Uber, Airbnb have had issues with regulatory issues, but is there any positive role in terms of spurring innovation or leveling the playing field? It used to manage the commons, right, once upon a time.
So to your point, I think Airbnb is an international company. And there is no international solution. We would definitely be interested if something like that came up in talking.
UN. Well, let's just deal with the US.
At this time, I don't think it's the UN's focus.
So I think with government, you know, as Phillip was saying, it's part. There's many tools to be a part of the whole fraud solution. So to have access to government databases and all that is great, but A, you've got to rely on the government to keep those up to date. B, they're not easy to hook into. And, you know, so it doesn't give you the full picture. You got to have maybe access to that as well as your own third-party checks as well as other different tools. So it's a whole suite of tools that encompasses the full fraud solution. And as Phillip said, internationally, you know, some countries don't have that, so you can't really rely on it all the time.
So then, Bob, is next. Like, what's the fifth and sixth reason why we can't use the government to spur innovation?
No, actually, I just wanted to distinguish between a few concerns that I think were raised here. I think we're talking at different levels, and there are different roles for different mechanisms, depending on where you are in the interaction. So what everybody wants is the right people to enter into exchanges, to complete those exchanges, and to fulfill their promises, and nothing bad to happen, right? But so you can think of three questions here. One is, how do you actually get people to enter these relationships? And here, systems of reputation, for instance, help a lot. Things like insurance can actually help a lot to provide some kind of assurances. So certainly there is a role for the state in this case. Then the question is, how do you get people to behave? And again, you know, this is a bit different because I have two couchsurfers right now at my place. I've given them the key. And I'm not a very trusting person, you know, and I do think about the worst case scenario. Part of the reason why I think they will behave is, you know, because they're nice people. I think they're nice people, but I also think that at least I know their names. I have a way to get back to them. I have this sort of fiction in my head that, you know, if anything goes bad, you know, maybe it's not the fiction. I don't want to find out whether, you know, whether any of these things work out. But, you know, I could potentially find them and, you know, bring them to justice if anything goes bad this way. They're very nice people, don't get me wrong, but, you know, this is what's called a paranoid cognition. Finally, the third question is, what do you do when things do go bad? Because when you're talking about millions and tens of millions of interactions, things will go bad, inevitably. So, in that case, how do you deal with the fallout? And this is a bit more complicated, and I think here the state has a huge role to play, and here's the reason why. Because, so, earlier, I'm sorry, I'm terrible with names. Sorry, Jennifer. So Jennifer talked earlier about adjudication, essentially figuring out who those people are, you know, asking for anonymous feedback. Part of the problem with creating these systems is that you as an organization all of a sudden have to make a determination on who is actually telling the truth. People may have various ulterior motives in reporting others and creating, you know, there are lots of interpersonal animosities, there are lots of things that may be misperceived. And the point I'm trying to make is that adjudication is expensive. Creating a court system is what you don't want to end up doing. In fact, you want to unload that probably onto the state. When there's, you know, there's a serious violation, you probably want to be able to go to the state. But for that, you need some kind of legal framework. So I think, to me, this is one of the biggest limitations of the sharing economy right now, is that you're trying to build an international organizational field, but at the same time, you have to work with different legal environments, some of which are more permissive than others, and certainly with a lot of legal complexities. And that is my point.
So the next question is, you know, you've all been around a number of years at this point. If you look at users on a cohort analysis, like a one-year-old, the user who joined last year, who's 1 year, you know, been in the system for 1 year, someone at Couchsurfing or Airbnb who's, you know, joined in 2006 and is after 2007, you look back. Is that person fundamentally different? You know, the user today from the user from a couple of years ago, as sharing has kind of, you know, permeated the culture? Sounds excited about this one.
Well, I think it breaks down differently across different types of segments rather than cohorts necessarily, which have some correlation. And certainly with Couchsurfing, we see different patterns of behavior in people who joined a long time ago because the community was smaller. So there are differences in the way that people behave who are part of like an older, tighter knit, perceived as smaller community versus joining later in the game when it's kind of, they heard about it on TV or from someone that they don't really know that well or that kind of thing. But as far as specific behavioral analysis, no, I would say it has more to do with the segment and where the person is in their life cycle relative to their own life and relative to Couchsurfing.
So yeah, I probably say similar to that, Airbnb. One thing, once again, is just the return guests that are coming back onto our site. To a certain extent, education is absolutely key, but also just the ability for the community to be able to police itself. Going to tools, anybody who is on Airbnb has the ability, and we do find that some of our long-standing users are ones that actually really use this, is police the site. They police the message threads, they police the listings, they police everything about it, and really identify to us again. And from that, once again, you set a baseline. You set a baseline of
attributes of a person who's more likely to participate in any of these sharing communities, young, old, educated, uneducated, rich, poor, taking apart, whether it's Uber or Airbnb or whoever it is.
I'm not sure I
understood the question.
Yeah.
Are younger people more likely to do this than older people? That's probably an obvious one, younger people. But are there other attributes that aren't as obvious that would make someone more likely to participate in a sharing community?
Well, okay, so I'm going to try to answer this question. At the same time, I would say that the data is very scant on this, including the data I have right now. So I would say that, yes, definitely, younger people are more likely to participate. I have been surprised, in the research I've done, though, that this is not necessarily the case, and you do have, you do have, for instance, older, a very significant group of older Couchsurfers who have their own, little community in a sense. And I'm sure you guys know what I'm talking about. I don't know so much about the other organizations, but to build a bit on the earlier question, I would think it stands to reason that the people who joined earlier would be a different kind of cohort. And the reason for this is, in the very least, just statistically speaking, you have the issue of survival bias, in that people in any sort of online organization, any sort of organization for that matter, in fact, people will cycle in and out. You're going to have churn. And some people will stay for one reason or another. And probably the people who will stay, there will be something that works for them with the organization. So the people you observe now who have stayed Airbnbers, Couchsurfers, Zimriders, whatever, they are, if they've been around for a couple of years, inevitably they must be different people. There's certainly also learning. I would also suspect that there's, this is just a hypothesis, that there's more of an ideological commitment in the beginning of an organization. There's very few people around when the incentives to join are actually pretty low, in a sense. I really care about public transportation. I really care about the more sustainable way of commuting, for instance. So I joined Zimride. Maybe there's nobody in my area for now, but I really like this idea. Whereas if my area is the Bay Area and there's a lot of people right now, then maybe they're able to find rides, and I don't have to go out of my way very much. This is just an example. So finally, the third reason why the earlier cohorts may be more different is because of what we call embeddedness. And this has to do with the fact that people form ties through an organization. They meet friends, they go to events such as this one, or such as local events like Couchsurfing, or various other community events that the organizations put on. And the organization becomes more and more of a part of their life. And as a result of this, there's bigger investment. So to me, it seems like there should definitely be differences. Now, is this really true? I have no idea at this point. This is a working hypothesis.
Next question is start off with Sonny. You have this tool, it's taken off in a couple of different companies. Other third parties, Legit, Scaffold, etc., haven't had as much success possibly. What's the differentiator? Legit and Scaffold's tried basically sucking in data from all the different communities and aggregating it and providing this bigger social safety trust score about somebody. So Jumio is a little bit different than that, but why? And then
yeah, that's actually a great question. And so the key differentiators I think about Jumio and the other companies that you mentioned is that they were mostly focusing on this type of space. And this space definitely has a need for it, but a lot of companies in the space are startups growing themselves. And so they're not rushing out to adapt to new technology. They're still getting their own infrastructure in place too. The other thing is that Jumio, we raised over $45 million in funding from Andreessen Horowitz as well as Citibank. And Citibank really, kind of installs that credibility to you. And so our customers range from Western Union, Travelocity, Citibank, global brands like Airbnb, right? And so we're not really focusing as much on the startups, but the bigger brand names. And they need a large infrastructure to support them. I have to be able to support 75 different countries, not just America. I have to have PCI level 1 data centers throughout Europe, throughout North America. This requires a lot of, when companies like Western Union use us, the security audits we have to go through. We do credit cards as well as IDs are, immense. And so startups, companies like that couldn't really go to that, wouldn't be able to work with those type of companies. And, we're working with a lot of the startups here in this room actually, but again, it takes them time. And the bigger brands were much more, they see the pain already, and they've got engineers available and people, man hours available to really solve this type of problem.
Yeah, so I think that the differences between Jumio and something like Scaffold is what they're actually kind of, providing. Jumio is a great partner and obviously one of the tools that we use for our verified ID program. But there's fairly other signals that are coming into that as well too. And I think as the sharing economy grows, that information is very valuable to understand. Once again, to bridge that gap between online and offline. Again, to the credibility as well too. I think that we do extensive tests on our vendors in order to ensure the security as well.
Would you ever use a Scaffold-like or legit-like technology or service?
I think we'd be open to anything that would potentially increase the trustworthiness and the safety of our user base. At the same time, though, I think that what you're getting to identifying, again, that baseline of good behavior and potentially seeing the norms outside of it. And I think for the sharing economy, a lot of us want to be able to understand that in-house, not necessarily externally.
So,
yeah, I would echo that. I think that, for example, vendors like Jumio are doing something fairly specialized. It's not easy to do just that piece well. So, and being able to really customize and build the solution around the specific problems that you have as an organization is pretty fundamental.
So, what are some of the next steps in terms of just to keep increasing safety? Is it data mining? Are there other tools out there that are on the horizon, even if it's not something you're going to implement in the next 6 months or a year? Are there other ideas out there that you're kind of keeping an eye on to increase trust and safety among your users, or to convince new users who are coming to the website, who are like, no way? You're like, no, we're safe. Come in.
Yeah, so I think it's all focused around access and being able to grant that access to as many people as possible with trying to understand how they're going to potentially act through the site. I think we are, one thing we did realize about verified ID was that, while we've been learning from, the initial launch of verified ID, our users really wanted this. A lot of our users were already kind of asking for this. We had hosts that, required some of this identification already. It's just trying to find that spot where you're trying to optimize for the access as well.
So one thing about Jumio we always get is when someone shows, the ID, we verify it's a real ID, they say, well, that's great, but what if someone stole that ID? And so they say, well, that will work, right? We can't verify who that person is, and that's where the other checks come in by other third-party vendors. But one thing we've got a lot of requests about is what we just launched last month, is facial recognition. And the concept behind that is you show your ID, and then you actually show your face to the web camera, and it takes a picture of both, and our software algorithm runs it, and does a face match and gives you a score back. And so now you at least have another security level to make sure the face matches the ID. It's not 100% foolproof yet, but it's another security level again. And you might use it for high-risk new people that come to the community, that fail your Facebook checks or other checks that you're doing, things like that.
I just wanted to make a point. As you pointed out, no, it's not foolproof, and in fact, nothing is. But playing devil's advocate, I could just blow up the picture that is on the ID and put it in front of the camera. I'm sure there's a way to detect that. But of course, this is of course highly unlikely. And part of the point with trust is that a person who is determined enough not to trust somebody will find plenty of reasons not to trust them. There are always these paranoid cognitions that are available to somebody to come up with a scenario where they're just buttering them up. I mean, surely this person, you've done business with them for 20 years and they have been trustful, but they have really been buttering you up to cheat on you now. I mean, this sounds very unlikely, of course, and it's miserable if you have to leave your life in this way, but we're certainly capable of this. And part of what verification can do is certainly assuage some of these doubts, but in the end, it's a very tough recipe to create. Exactly how do you justify to people that they should trust? This is a bit of a philosophical problem that has no. I don't think anybody is ever going to find the perfect solution to this question.
To speak a little bit more about that, I think also and this is one of the reasons why we're really trying to push the envelope with verified ID, is we kind of dub this term as you have a moral hazard operating on an online profile, and you have this idea of how do you combat moral hazard, how do you combat anonymous behavior, and we believe there's this idea of moral equity. So the more you know about somebody, the less they potentially act bad. It's kind of, I call it back to the example of when everybody in here was a kid, and you were in the kitchen and you put your hand in the cookie jar because your mom wasn't looking. If your mom was looking at that point, there's that idea that there's that person who's there for you, in good times and bad as well.
Oh, yes, okay.
Sorry, can I just jump in here, because I think it's really important. I'd be really interested in what the panel thinks about how those increased verification kind of methods interact with privacy. I was talking the other day with the idea that, actually, I feel kind of uncomfortable sending a picture of my credit card to someone else. I mean, it's kind of the next stage along that I already feel a bit of discomfort when I have to give it to someone on the phone. But once we suffer under these illusions that if we put our credit card details into a computer, that no one can find out and it's somehow anonymized, and yet we take a picture and somehow it's worse. And there's a kind of increased trust demand to submitting this kind of personal information. I wonder how that plays out and the barriers in between.
So, yeah, I can take that.